Don't question it, dog. Only a small return from the hiatus. Today, guys, I've got another What If commission to show you guys. Again, being sponsored by Hyper Etheria X213. Essentially, the idea today being, what if Fleetway Sonic turned good? It's technically a more specific idea than that, but you'll see how I do it throughout the story. And that's the name I'm going with, since it'll obviously get, I don't know what, 10 more views than usual. So yeah, let's go crazy. Remember, guys, though, I do mainly focus on the game universe here with some elements of the extra stuff added in, so let's see how we go. Remember the very familiar scene that many of you guys should know personally by now. After a couple of adventures facing off against each other, the ultimate battle between Sonic versus the Death Egg robot had begun. But unlike a certain story, there is no negative powered machines, no accidents, just the Hedgehog with all 7 Chaos Emeralds in his possession this time, just like the original. After being pushed to the brink of defeat, the gems that him and Tails have worked hard on obtaining surround the Hedgehog for his need to defeat Robotnik now by any means necessary, to turn thoughts into power, which in this universe, that statement holds a different meaning. Within moments, yellow light erupts from Sonic as power flows, but strangely though, he begins to lose consciousness, feeling like he was almost taking a backseat in his own mind. In Eggman's point of view though, it's a bit worse, seeing not only his blue rival turn yellow, but with eyes that will scare any other being. With a cackle too, then crimson silence, the yellow demon in this universe is born, as the Hedgehog walks forward like he was only here for one job and one job alone. As we cut back to Sonic later, back on the ground of Angel Island already, strangely having no memory of what happened, already deep into Angel Island Act 1 when Tails finally arrives, relieved to finally find where his hero has been, and not being able to tell what happened to that brutal fight on the Death Egg. You see here unconsciously, since Super Sonic had been more divisive in his battle with Eggman, he finds himself on Angel Island a bit earlier, and due to his high power, a red kid like Knuckles trying to hit a sneaky fit to whatever this yellow, violent being that just pulled out of nowhere is knocked back easily. The Super Sonic disgusted at the attempt, even as his chaos energy finally starts to run low, before running out eventually. Sonic being Sonic though isn't too worried about the whole magic mechanics of how things work, and just keeps moving at supersonic speeds like he always does, while it's the opposite for Tails, really wanting to know what the emeralds really work and how Sonic didn't remember anything, this leading to an easier event to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, since Eggman here isn't given as much time to influence the island, so less robots, less industrialization, even though there are some changes here, like the murals at Hidden Palace Zone depicting the emergence of a super form as almost like a separate being itself. Knuckles here fighting off Sonic way more fiercely than the original after seeing the demon, now in blue, returning back for round 2. The Echidna here almost tempted to turn to his own super form, but strangely has some hesitation about it, like it's a last resort that he doesn't want to do entirely. After defying the team up of classic Team Sonic here, the Echidna here recounts the Master Emerald's history being a little bit different this timeline. Not only mentioning a long line of his people due to their greediness of the Emerald's power being cursed to a similar phenomenon of the Chaos Empowered form, it creating a violent personality within his people. As unknown events to all friends and foes in this timeline, the Ancients, the alien group that brought the Chaos Emeralds here in the first place, shifted how their power was used. The Tikal prayer itself being changed here to the following. The servers are the 7 Chaos. Chaos is power. Power is manifested by the heart. When used fully, the emeralds didn't just empower their user to their heart's desire, but creates a persona around that will. This statement couldn't be more exemplified at the climax of this venture, when facing Eggman in this version of the Doomsday Zone, due to not being as prepared as he is in canon, a combination of the ship from that fight, and now a rebuilt Metal Sonic vowing his revenge. Basically, if you remember how Sonic Advance 3 bosses were, with Eggman and Gemma working together in one machine, it will basically be the same thing here. Overall, creating a devastating force that even with the lessened time in our villain's hands, especially when you have the Master Emerald on your side, it still ends up being a tough battle. Knuckles in this timeline also being in the Death Egg to help out the duo, since there was no Mecha Sonic built here to distract him. But even so, even with the hindsight of all that, and against the Echidna's warning, Sonic transforms into Super Sonic. But with him trying his best to notice the shift while he transforms into the foreign entity. Fleetway is born again, though he's on a one-track mind, laser beams, claw attacks, all cockily taking down the machine in the same eerie Sonic attitude. Pretty easily overall, and with only the Master Emerald left, as the Doctor is the one falling to Earth this time, with Metal swearing revenge. But here, this is where things change, strangely though. Being near the Master Emerald seems to just boost the transformation time of the Hedgehog, which confuses Knuckles and Tails. Fleetway then begins to have a profanity. Finally being given time to think, he then questions his own existence. Eggman was seemingly dealt with. He had no connection to these other two, and he never thought about who or what he really was beyond the will of his annoying counterpart. The lack of answer angering the being, actually blasting off all throughout space to let go some steam. The Death Egg beginning to collapse before Tails and Knuckles could go get their friend back. This is where, just like in the comics, we get a bit of a self-discovering arc here for Fleetway, or at least that's what he calls himself. Soon enough, the still powered up Hedgehog returning back to Earth, where he crash lands to a nearby home residence that usually wouldn't be met yet in this timeline. When awoken up, the being is met with hospitality from a long-eared rabbit, cream, cheese, and vanilla, who are all curious on how someone just survives a fall like that. But Fleetway is quick to boast, but is unable to really answer the question of who he really is. And him also being a bit annoyed that his transformation wouldn't last forever. But here he's bolstered by the family to encourage the Speed Demon themselves. So kinda like in the Fleetway comic, we follow Fleetway for the next week, beginning to create his own fan group in a way. Cream soon softening the emotions of the being just by a little bit, several times having to discourage the violence that he'd usually display. Like that one time when he gets into a small scuffle with some random trio of rookie extreme gear riders. The early Babylon rogues not really being able to tell that they're arguing with a literal super being, are soon aghast and embarrassed when the yellow blur is doing better tricks than all of them. So it's not long till Fleetway is essentially the co-leader of the group themselves. Slight bit of edge of the group not being entirely too goody as it endears him to the three. Even with all the weird times, the four question why did the yellow Hedgehog kept powering up so much, almost like he was trying to elongate the transformation as long as possible. Eventually though, Tails and Knuckles are able to find out Fleetway's location, where the red one is already ready to box. Tails is surprised to see the shift in the being. He essentially just acted like a more crude version of Sonic, but regardless, he still wanted to see his best buddy back. So with a bit of strain and effort, reluctantly, Sonic is able to come back. Now with the strange ability of being able to hear Fleetway like a voice in his head, especially when the emeralds are around. This would end up being the strange dynamic for a while throughout the modern era. Numerous times Sonic and Fleetway arguing in the same body, the same system would happen. Sonic would tackle adventures head on, like always, and once needing a power up, just like in the events of Perfect Chaos, Fleetway would appear to deal the true devastating blow his way. With the time he has left, going back to mess with his own friend group for a little while, but not for long, which ends up being another point of contention between the two. Both friend groups honestly getting mad at each other a bunch of times due to this dynamic. Funny how the manifested will itself was now wanting to be separate from its originator. The changes run deeper than you think. I've already laid out the fundamental way how the super form has changed here. So eventually, later on, when the peak battle we all know happens, Sonic and Shadow fighting against the final Bio Lizard, Shadow feeling his own motivations to protect the Earth is now able to win against the prototype Ultimate Lifeform, but this is far from the end of things. This universe also technically being what if the super forms had their own personality. While Super Shadow did serve the will of protecting the planet from danger, the new being controlling things decided to take things in his own order, his own divine order. This Fleetway Shadow, or Void Shadow, I'm gonna call him, seeing himself as the true ultimate life form, seeing the connections to Maria and the Earth as just shackles of failure considering what happened, believing in order to truly save humanity and give them a chance to be happy, as she said, would have to be under his divine leadership. This all going over our hero Hedgehog's head, not really messing with that whole philosophy stuff, but he had no interest in his pals getting led by such a whack job, so with gritted teeth, a rematch between Fleetway and Void would happen here, mimicking the same one that we'll see on the arc. Even as two separate beings, these two were water and oil, just like the original Sonic and Shadow are. One acting like a deity and another like a demon will do that to you. It taking the will of Sonic and Fleetway's shared consciousness for once barely working together to barely win them out the fight, leading to a safer landing than in canon, so none of that amnesia nonsense ends up happening here. Instead, Fleetway mimicking Storm and Cream's ingenuity, and at least gain the edgy bum to at least tame and realize that he too had to deal with the whole two personality thing that he's now stuck with. So there are numerous times with Knuckles where Sonic and Shadow reluctantly, and I mean by really reluctantly, meditate with the Echidna. The Echidna himself very much refusing to transform ever himself for some reason, thus having to deal with a few adventures here, like when the events of Shadow the Hedgehog happens, with Shadow here having his memory this time and knowing what he was, void in the back of his head was shown very clearly that his DNA being a mix of a bunch of bloodthirsty aliens, a doctor going insane, and a mirror predicting Fleetway's crazy self. The whole self-righteousness of the Hedgehog does slowly disappear just by a little bit. Eventually the two working together to destroy Devil Doom once and for all. Breaking the fourth wall a little bit. Man, I low-key be stay disrespecting this man Devil Doom. That is now 2 what-ifs of this man getting bodied just like that. One day bro will get a bounce back. Sadly for everyone though, this would be the last time, and for sure not the worst, where the super phenomenon would get out of hand, especially for this ultimate chaotic unleashed arc. So eventually on break from his usual antics with his own friend group, or followers as he would say, Fleetway finds himself summoned again in the opening scene of said game, having already been tired of the Doctor by now and only really alive because his goody counterpart doesn't want to take things that far, and I guess Cream being there too. But this time, she wasn't here. Perfect opportunity to finally get rid of this threat once and for all. So eventually, when the demonic speedster seemingly traps Eggman for the final time, just like in the original though, a Metal Sonic though being here taunts the being forward. Annoyed that this bucket of bolts was still kicking around, Fleetway needs to crash out for the final time of course. This leading to another argument between the two personalities again, which leads to the perfect opportunity for the electrification trap to start, with the manifested will here and its user being at odds conveniently. After the smoke finally disappears, Sonic barely gets up to see a sight that shocks him and amuses the Doctor. Across from him, for the first time he sees him and Fleetway separated, all before being blasted back on the planet. Now with phase 1 of his plan done and the emergence of Dark Guy being imminent, him and Metal would have no problem taking care of things now. Due to Fleetway already being a negatively powered being at the time of the split, there really isn't a reason for the whole werehog junk to end up happening here. Fleetway though, finally free from his shackles, quickly abandons Sonic. No time limit, full freedom, he can now handle this Eggman situation his own way, with Sonic having too much pride himself, dismissing the monster. Also, each joining their own squad to combat the whole darkness enemies going around here. Chip here being very bothered that their #1 chance of defeating Dark Eye was at odds at a time like this. What dawns both groups eventually though is while Fleetway was technically in a super form, he definitely wasn't as powerful as he once was. With his original will being severed, his abilities were pretty much trash compared to they were before, crashing out multiple times if it wasn't for the Babylon Rose trying to hold him back from just destroying some environments out of frustration. Especially with the few times Sonic and Fleetway would cross paths, fighting each other to truly see who was the fastest and who was really getting things done. Even though Fleetway would win more times than not, but not really be able to truly finish off the job since their lives were technically interconnected. This arc continued to have an interesting conundrum, with one team typically handling the daytime stages while the other handled the nighttime. Chip through his mentor and really trying to get the pair to work together again, because yes, while Sonic may have not gotten the whole piece of Dark Guy power here, another person did, as the first crack that hit the planet was near a certain island after all, which will be leading to devastating consequences later down the road. The team meta was now here: Sonic, Tails, Amy, Shadow, with Fleetway, Cream, Jet, Storm, and Wave, and a bunch of others on both sides, with the last emerald finally being obtained. Finally, a completed Dark Guy and Eggman on his side emerges, but this wasn't all though. Alongside him is a super Metal Sonic being here. Due to the fact that he was a machine, he didn't have to deal with the whole manifestation of will nonsense that his whole biological counterpart had to deal with. Dark Guy was already Light Guy's equal in the original, but now with the super robot on his side, Metal was essentially ensuring that Dark Guy didn't go rogue this time, so everything really is under Eggman's control. Shadow attempts transforming again to fight against the creature, while Fleetway reluctantly and with some hesitation with the emeralds, Sonic and Fleetway combining back together into one being. Fleetway and Sonic finally pushing their differences aside to fight against the Metal, who learned from a lot of years of being trashed very easily. even transforming into Super Neo at some point, truly leading to a high diff fight for all to see. But everything was slowly going into our hero's favor. Metal was technically losing his 2v1, and Dark Gaia was technically having a 3v1 that he was dealing with. Dark Gaia, noticing this, panics, and with one last ditch effort, attempts to manifest himself into another being that contained the same energy as him. Knuckles, back on Angel Island, begins to scream in pain as dark energy surrounds him, vowing that the only way to get out of this predicament was for the first time for him to power up into his own chaos form from the Master Emerald, regardless of his ancestors' history, which ends up leading to a devastating decision. The dark energy in combination with the chaos form ends up leading to something disastrous, as soon enough an old beaten up helmet, destroyed helmet from ancient times, begins to hover, turning the once protector into a deity beyond comparison. Suddenly a booming, cocky voice enters the battlefield. A deity with wavy red hair, Egyptian costume, and spiked gloves enters. Enerjack can only grin at the excitement of having a true battle of gods. Teach these Gaia or whatever hedgehog creatures who the real deity was. Everyone being shocked when a simple wave of his hand erasing the rest of Light Gaia from existence in a very fast rate. Chuckling that it was very easy for him to take over as host. Now jeering for the two hedgehogs to come after him handling the hedgehogs like an old man character in an anime. The subtitle Godbreaker was definitely being shown here. No matter how creative or precise either Fleetway or Void was, they couldn't take this deity down at all. Just imagine Goku and Vegeta fighting from the Metal Cooler movie. Chip now beginning to disappear, and remember that Dark Gaia influence was still in there. Chip uses the rest of his energy and connection to the sun to give his remaining energy to Fleetway, standing back and finally making his negatively powered form positive, much more than just positive. The once red streaks in his eyes turning blue, then even gold, then almost even disappearing. Fleetway noticing what this transfer of energy meant in the long term but accepting it anyway. Fleetway Luminous emerges, truly becoming the antidote to Enerjack. The demigod is beaten, bashed with powers from both the Sun and Chaos Emeralds, the helmet being smashed, leading to Knuckles being returned back to normal. Fleetway and then indirectly Sonic now having the power of Light Gaia with a flash with their connection to the earth, returning it back to where it once was, fixing all the cracks in the earth finally. Us being met with the scene of Cream hugging Fleetway hard with the rest of the squad. Everyone else surprised to see the two separate again strength, especially with Shadow, technically really wanted the same thing to happen with himself. But Fleetway here is strangely quiet. Suddenly a necklace, the same one on Chip's neck, appearing on his chest, with a bit of a chuckle, telling his group that they're separated because he was technically no longer Sonic's manifested will anymore. He was something else now. Soon enough, in whatever centuries from now, Dark Gaia would end up rising up again. And who knows, maybe with a little bit of that weird energy guy's abilities too. Sonic had already felt annoyed at the loss of his friendship and telling him to just get to it. Both hedgehogs knew the true answer. With what happened earlier, the crazed hedgehog himself had become the bringer of light here. Fleetway was the new Light Gaia. And just like how the cycle entails, he sadly had to disappear until he was needed again, giving the one and only sad look he's ever given in his life, before finally gaining some purpose again, even if it hurt a little bit. Yelling back to Shadow that hopefully that Void guy fixed everything like he said he was going to do before him, and looking back at his goody copy, that he hopefully wouldn't screw things up without hitting around. Both hedgehogs finally getting a true respect for each other, with Fleetway finally disappearing off into the earth. Even as everyone else moved on, especially Cream being hurt by it the most, Sonic was never bothered by the possibility that he probably wouldn't be able to transform again. He took Fleetway's word as much as he took his own. So it's not a surprise to the Blue Blood when many adventures later, the enemy of the ancients themselves, the enemy of Earth here, reached the atmosphere. When a boisterous cackle out of nowhere is heard, the hedgehog smirks back that he wouldn't be letting his copy save the day before him. As this is where I'll be ending the story off for right now. Dang, that jump took a bit to make. This idea is technically like what, 2, 3, and 1, Fleetway turning good, they super forms being their own personalities, and I guess a little bit of Enerjack. I had to put the go in there for once. So hey, Atheria, I hope I cooked to your liking with the notes you gave me. Got a bit more creative just like I did last time. This story was honestly harder to make than the Wisp one. But come on bro, I was Fleetway joining the whole Light Gaia, Dark Gaia cycle bro, come on dog. Anyways, I'm not gonna be too long. Like I said, I am still on my hiatus. I still want to turn this channel around low-key with how the views have been lately. So don't be surprised seeing an influx of shorts coming in soon. Scourge Part 3 and 4 are out for any members who want to join. As for me, I'll be back on my automation grind and dealing with all this couch tests, alright? You'll have a blessed rest of your day in Jesus' name. Till next time.